by himself on the plastic little raft. He wrote a pretty great book. Both him and I were.
It's actually mentioned in the book, if you're interested. At one point, Pi lists survivors at sea. He mentions Stephen Callahan.
Steve Callahan. So he, the first thing actually, when I started thinking about the script, I visited him. Me and the screenplay writer, David McGee, went and visited him in Maine. So we went out to sea and talked to him for days. And it turns out I brought him to Taiwan to make the movie together with me as not only consultant to me on the spiritual side, his experience, details, what you go through, and also he's a great guidance to Suraj. I have to balance it, just, if that's the right look, we go through this and that, and just technically train. A lot of the details are done, supervised by him. And also, it turns out, I built this wave tank just for this movie in Taiwan. And we're just learning how to use that, because nobody done it before. And he is a water consultant, how the wave land, how the wave functions, how to deal with it. So he's a great help. And he's a great spiritual leader for us, because he's fighting cancer at the same time. He's in the hospital. So he's a man we all cherish, just cherish what's good in life, what hang on to. And faith is indeed the thing that making through the voyage, fighting cancer and everything you go through. So we do have that guru, so to speak. And there are other spiritual stories, but that's the one.
Serge, can you remember anything that he told you that really stayed with you or helped your performance?
Well, he kind of, I met him we were on a ship, and it was raining and the big waves, and I'm freaking out a little bit. And I meet Steve on the ship, and he says, "How are you doing?" And I didn't know who he was at that point. He kind of explained to me how he had survived for 76 days, and we kind of had this we had this long conversation, and he was telling me how he felt and how, I asked him, how did you feel when you were on that raft all alone, all around you, all you can see is, water. And he said that most of the time you don't feel anything. You're left completely blank. So those moments when you feel happiness are extreme, like they're ecstatic. And he kind of explained to me how emotions don't just become what we see normally or feel normally. They become these extremely strong and very powerful feelings, and that's what I tried to kind of put into my acting as well, is just that feeling.
Just a burst of emotion.
Yeah, these bursts.
Yeah.
In writing the book, another book that is mentioned in Life of Pi is a classic of survival at sea called Survive the Savage Sea. Hard to say it 10 times in a row. By a Scottish farmer named Dougal Robertson, who was sailing around the world with his family, and west of the Galapagos they were hit by killer whales. And they survived, I think it was 26 days at sea, which is less than Steve Callahan, but it was his entire family, and a Welsh hitchhiker they picked up at the Panama Canal. And he wrote this wonderfully understated book called Survive the Savage Sea, which was full of these very practical details which I needed in writing the book. And you asked about the spiritual side of it. I started writing the book when I was in India. I was hitchhiking for 6 months. And I grew up in a completely secular household. And I'd studied philosophy, which is a very good way of turning you into an atheist or an agnostic. And so religion was always very external to my life. And then I got to India, and as you saw in the book at one point, and in the movie, Rafe Spall, the character that Rafe Spall plays, talks about an owl that sputtered, coughed, and died. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I was in India because it was a cheap place to be, and this novel just wasn't coming to life. Any of you here who've written something creative will realize that terrible feeling of putting so much effort into it and it doesn't come to life. So I had to put it aside, and I had this sort of inner hole in me. And I just, for the first time in my life, and how old was I? I was 31, I think. I finally noticed the abundance of religious expression in India. And there's more religion expressed per square mile in India than anywhere else on earth. Every religion has its members there. And I started noticing it for the first time, and I suddenly was intrigued, not so much by sort of the anthropology of it, how religion is manifested, but how it's lived, how it's felt. So I was interested in the phenomenon of faith. And so there's this very deeply unreasonable capacity to believe something that is fundamentally not reasonable. I was intrigued by that. And the reasons there's three religions in the story and in the movie is I didn't want to focus on one in particular. I wanted to look at what was common to all religions, which is that phenomenon of faith. Each religion practices and has a different view of the universe. You can't sort of say they're all the same. They're definitely not. But at the core, they have that leap of faith, that believing something that is not rational, that is not material right in front of you. And that's what struck me.
Okay, yes, there in the center, that gentleman.